What hunts the shadows when even the night itself trembles? So asked an ancient scrap of prophecy, etched into corroded adamantium and buried beneath the ruins of a fortress moon lost to time. It spoke of a figure wreathed in silent fury, a revenant shaped by betrayal and born again from the void. The galaxy, already drowning beneath the screams of 10,000 broken worlds, felt a subtle shift, a whisper of wings no longer bound by flesh or mercy. In the immensity of the eternal war, where empires fell like ash through a dying sun's grasp, a presence stirred. Not a myth, not a memory, but a returning storm of vengeance. Corax, the Shadow Primarch, moved once more. Through warp-torn corridors of fate and forgotten oaths, he hunted the children of treachery, his name echoing like a curse older than grief itself. The galaxy had not forgotten Isvan, though it wished to. Entire species carried the memory like a wound beneath their collective skin. The Black Sands, still haunted by the death cries of ravaged legions, clung to reality in defiance of oblivion. It was there, in the spectral whispers of that massacre, that Corax had first been broken and reshaped into something far sharper. Warp scars veiled his form, feathers of darkness leaking from him like living smoke. Once a lord of liberation, he'd have become a specter of judgment. His thoughts were torches in a chamber of midnight, burning, precise, merciless. As he drifted through the ruins, the shadows stiffened, bending toward him as if recognizing their sovereign. Vengeance was not an act. It was a pilgrimage. In the void between warring stars, an arc of corrupted flesh drifted aimlessly, its hull a cathedral of mutated steel. Within, the traitor warband known as the Shattered Hymn feasted on memories stolen from their victims. But on that night, something colder than their devotion to chaos crept through their corridors. A distortion, a flicker, a silent subtraction of sound and certainty. One by one, the warband realized the truth. The lights had not dimmed, reality itself had. Corax stepped from the dark like a verdict. No grand proclamation, no righteous roar. Only the taloned whisper of wings that folded in with unnatural precision. They screamed prayers to their twisted gods. No answer came. What Corax did inside that ark would never be chronicled by mortal scribes. Flesh dissolved into shadows. Souls were plucked apart as though made of wet parchment. Only fragments remained. A claw mark burned into a ritual altar. A corpse still kneeling in prayer long after death. A single feather-black, weightless, humming with residual dread. Beyond the slaughter, Corax found what he sought. A rune-carved tablet bearing the sigil of the word-bearers. A message, a challenge, a summons. The traitors were taunting him, beckoning him deeper into the labyrinth of their heresy. The Primarch's eyes narrowed, and his form dispersed into a cloud of shadow stuff, ascending into the silent dark. The hunt widened. Across the ravaged surface of Kelth's orbital graveyards, the remnants of Ultramar's defenders sensed him. They did not see him move, yet they felt their weapons tremble with an instinctive recognition. A Primarch was near. Not one radiant with noble light like Guilliman, but one hollowed by the cruelty of fate. Corax passed them without a word, his silhouette unraveling into spectral wisps that clung to the wreckage. Even the proud Astartes, forged to fear no nightmare, stepped aside. For in Corax's gaze lay a purity of purpose so absolute, bordered on horror. He sought not to rebuild, nor to avenge for glory's sake. He sought equilibrium, the rebalancing of a ledger written in blood during the heresy's first dawn. Within the catacombs beneath Kelth's broken orbitals, he found it, a vault carved in defiance of the Imperium, lined with blasphemous scripture. Word-bearers had gathered, their crimson armor drenched in ceremonial oils. A dark sermon was rising to crescendo when the shadows themselves rebelled. Corax erupted from the gloom with surgical brutality. His talons cleaved through ceramite and oath alike. His voice, a rare thing, escaped him only once, a quiet whisper that carried the weight of millennia. For Istvan, the vault's candles died, hearts stilled. Only when silence claimed the chamber did Corax approach the altar, where a single name was inscribed in fresh blood. Lorgar. The name burned in him. Once a brother devout, poetic, dangerous in ways no weapon could contain. Now a prophet of damnation. Corax felt the warp pull taut around that name, like a snare laid across the pathways of destiny. He reached out, talons grazing the sigil, and the vault twisted. A vision flooded his mind. A world drowning in crimson fog, its towers carved into sermons, its skies torn by chanting that shaped the warp itself. Lorgar waited there, expecting him, perhaps welcoming him. Corax recoiled from the vision, feathers shedding like dying embers. He understood then that the hunt was no longer linear. It was cyclical, a trap disguised as prophecy. He traveled next to the edges of the maelstrom, where the warp bled into real space like an infected wound. Here drifted Navros Ix, a world shattered by apostasy. Its atmosphere echoed with the screams of those still half alive. Yet Corax did not come for the dying. He came for the one orchestrating their suffering, a dark apostle forging fresh heretics from the wreckage of hope. Badakar, disciple of Lorgar. The apostle awaited him atop a broken basilica, chanting praises to the four. When Corax descended, Badakar smiled confident in the warp's embrace. But Corax had transcended such bindings. His talons met flesh, and the apostle's smile froze in disbelief. Before dying, Badakar offered a prophecy spoken in a trembling, ecstatic voice. Your vengeance births only the future we desire, Ravenlord. Hunt us, and you carry our gospel into the marrow of fate. Corax crushed the apostle's throat. Yet the words lingered, sinking into the cavern of his soul. Was he unraveling the traitors or tightening the noose they'd prepared? Silence answered him. The shadows coiled around his wings like serpents whispering unsanctioned truths. The universe, it seemed, was laughing quietly. On the forge world of Vorgon's Reach, the Adeptus Mechanicus recorded distortions that defied even their cold logic. A void surge, a spectral absence, a Primarch-shaped wound in reality. Corax appeared at the heart of a traitor manufactory, its assembly lines producing demon-infused siege engines. The Iron Warriors stationed there never heard him enter. They only heard each other die. Corax moved like a memory trying to erase itself, talons severing destinies mid-breath. When the last traitor fell, he found blueprints etched with Lorgar's personal annotations. They spoke not of war machines, but of something far worse. Something old. Something returning. The truth coalesced in fragments. Lorgar wasn't fleeing Corax. He was preparing him, sculpting his path through precision bloodshed, guiding him like a blade toward a future written in shadowed scripture. Corax stood on the derelict battlements of the Manufactorum, watching warp storms coil like serpents through the sky. For the first time since his rebirth, doubt touched him. Not fear, he was long beyond such mortal trappings, but suspicion. If vengeance was his tether, who had tied the knot? The wind shifted, feathers rifted. The universe held its breath. He vanished into the warp's deepest shadow, seeking the world he had glimpsed in the vision, a world shaped by sermons and scarlet fog. Somewhere there, buried beneath eons of treachery, Lorgar waited. Yet as Corax crossed the threshold between reality and nightmare, something followed him. A presence, familiar, watching, guiding, or perhaps anticipating. Corax did not turn. The void behind him rippled, a silent question forming in its wake. And though the galaxy would never hear his answer, it felt the tremor of fate bending quietly, ominously, toward a truth neither brother wished to acknowledge. Then the darkness swallowed everything. The darkness swallowed everything, yet within that void, a trembling echo lingered, an afterimage of wings and unspoken grief. As Corax drifted deeper into the abyss between realities, those left behind felt the tremor of his passing like a wound reopening. On distant shrine worlds, priests paused mid-chant as their sacred incense curled unnaturally against the air, forming shapes too precise to be coincidence. Acolytes whispered that the Ravenlord's shadow had brushed their souls. Others claimed it was an omen of something far crueler, an echo of a prophecy once forbidden, now stirring in the marrow of the Imperium like a buried blade twisting free. Across 1,000 temples, faith flickered with a soft, frightened gasp. On the war-torn bastion of Helios Cradle, a company of Ravenguard veterans lingered in grim silence. They felt him an instinct older than words. Their chaplain, encased in blackened armor carved with penitential scripture, stared at the red-lit horizon and wondered whether their Primarch still served the Emperor's light, or whether the abyss had claimed him entirely. Yet none dared voice the thought. In the Imperium, even truth could be treason, and doubt was a heresy more lethal than any blade. Far above the scarred world, an inquisitorial vessel prowled the void like a wounded predator. Inquisitor Kedras Vahel watched reports spill across his hololith, sightings of a winged shadow, anomalous disappearances of traitor cells, warp perturbations forming a pattern only those who lived half their life in suspicion could decipher. He traced the pattern with a gloved finger, his jaw tightening. Corax was moving with purpose, but whose? The Emperor's? His own? Or that of something far older, whispering through the cracks between stars? Vihal had hunted demons, psychers, and apostates, but this was a Primarch haunted by his own myth. Even the Inquisition tread lightly around legends that still breathed. Below, in the undercity of Helios Cradle, those too broken to fight carved prayers into their makeshift shelters. They remembered the Raven Guard who once liberated their chains, and the stories of the shadowed angel who brought freedom in silence. But the new stories frightened them. They spoke of a figure wreathed not in justice, but in mourning, a being who killed traitors not with fury, but with a grief so profound it unmade them. The people wondered if such sorrow could still belong to one sworn to the Emperor, or if grief endless and unyielding had led the angel astray. Meanwhile, in the warp-tainted ruins of Navros Ix, the lingering shade of Badakar's prophecy spread like rot among the surviving heretics. They whispered to one another that Corax's rage was the final verse of the Word-Bearer's grand scripture, that every kill only deepened the ritual Lorgar had foretold. Some believed it, others feared it, but all felt the pull a tremor in the warp that suggested Corax was no longer merely hunting, but being guided. Shaped, sculpted into something indispensable to a future too terrible to name. On the throne moons of Ultramar, Robert Guilliman received encrypted messages from his agents. He read them in solitary silence. The reports were contradictory. Corax killing traitors, yes, but also destabilizing entire sectors with his unpredictable strikes. Guilliman, burdened with restoring a fractured empire, felt a rift within him, brotherly loyalty clashing against the cold calculus of survival. If Corax was slipping beyond the Emperor's design, Guilliman might one day need to weigh blood against duty. And that thought alone carved a fresh wound into his soul. In the drifting reliquary ships of the Adeptus Sororitas, Canoness Vera knelt in her sanctum, gazing upon a relic feather sealed within crystal stasis. It pulsed faintly alive with an energy neither holy nor profane, but something between. Her prayers faltered. She sensed a truth the ecclesiarchy would bury rather than confront, that sanctity and damnation were not opposite ends of a spectrum, but spirals entwining toward an unseen center. Corax now walked that center, and the Imperium was not prepared for what he might become. In a hidden fortress on the edge of the maelstrom, word-bearers gathered around a blood-engraved altar. There, a dark apostle read from a tome bound in Flen's truth. He spoke of Corax's approach, of destiny tightening like a noose. His congregation chanted, not in fear, but in exultation. Corax believed he hunted them. In reality, they believed they were summoning him. His vengeance, they claimed, was the final ingredient, an emotion so pure it could reshape reality when wielded by a Primarch's will. Their heresy deepened, their confidence swelled. Yet even they did not fully understand the force they toyed with. Amid all this, Corax drifted through the warp storm, his form fracturing into feathers of shadow and reforming again with each pulse of unreality. He saw memories that were not his, Logar kneeling in firelight, chanting truths forbidden to men. Erebus smiling as if privy to a joke the galaxy would one day choke on. And visions of a figure whose outline resembled Corax himself, but twisted, hollow, and weeping black tears. The warp whispered, "This is what they want you to become." He refused the vision, tearing himself free with a cry that shattered the quiet of unreality. But the damage was done. Something clung to him, an echo, a seed, a prophecy now rooted in his very shadow. As he approached the world he had seen in the vision, a world of crimson fog and sermons written in the sky, reality buckled. A signal pulsed through the galaxy, a transmission, a confession. It came not from traitors, but from the Inquisition. A single sentence, broadcast in encrypted terror: "We have uncovered evidence that Corax did not return alone." The encrypted confession spread like a bruise through the Imperium's veins, blooming across astropathic networks and whispered chambers. Corax did not return alone. Those who heard it felt something break quietly, like a prayer snapped in half. Across the hollow monasteries of dying worlds, priests pressed trembling hands to trembling hearts, sensing a presence just beyond comprehension. Not a demon, not a Xenos. Something older than guilt, older than war, older than the lie that birthed the Imperium's first dawn. In the fading light of Helios' cradle, a young confessor knelt beneath a shattered stained glass window, asking the Emperor for certainty, only to feel a cold answer ripple across his soul. Certainty had abandoned the galaxy long ago. Above that same world, Inquisitor Vihel gathered his retinue in the dim sanctum of his vessel. The data he had torn from Forbidden's vaults glowed red upon a cracked hololith. There were two shadows trailing Corax's path, one shaped like memory, the other like hunger. Vihel's interrogator muttered a prayer, but the words dissolved into dust. For the first time in decades, Vihel allowed himself a whisper of fear. It was not Corax he feared, but the thing that clung to the Primarch's wake, like a ghost starving for a purpose it once possessed. The Inquisitor closed his eyes and wondered if the Emperor had seen this future, or if this calamity lurked beyond even his sight. Meanwhile, in the drifting trenches of Vorgon's Reach, a squad of Raven Guard fought through the ruins of a defiled manufactorum. They were veterans of 1,000 sorrows, yet something gnawed at them, an ache behind the eyes that no helm could shield. Their revered sergeant paused beneath a broken lumen bar, feeling an impossible sensation, another heartbeat beside his own. A phantom rhythm, the echo of a second life brushing against his armor. One of his brothers cried out, swearing he saw two shadows trailing each marine, as though reality had begun miscounting their existence. They fought harder after that, not to repel traitors, but to outrun the sense that something followed them, mimicking their movements, measuring their souls as a hunter sizes prey. On the shrine world of Trismega Prime, Cardinal Arctavia stood before her congregation, her voice trembling as she spoke of faith enduring the crucible of terror. But the people saw what she hid, how her hands shook, how her eyes darted to the silhouettes cast by the candles. For she, more than any of them, understood the scripture forbidden to all but the highest ranks, a prophecy of the twin harvest, describing a warrior whose shadow would one day come alive, carrying a will not its own. That scripture had been censored, burned, erased, yet she felt it rising now, inside her like a splinter of dying truth. She wondered how many lies the ecclesiarchy had built upon that omission, and how many more would crumble before dawn. In the warp, Corax drifted through tumultuous storms that clawed at his feathers with claws of impossible hunger. He felt the presence beside him, sometimes distant, sometimes close enough to brush his thoughts. It whispered in a voice like his own, but hollow. It spoke of Istvan, but distorted. His pain mirrored back at him, twisted by something that remembered everything he lost, yet none of what he fought for. Corax roared into the void, but the echo that answered him was identical. His tone, his anguish, his wrath, yet laced with a cold amusement that did not belong to him. For the first time since his return, Corax felt a tremor of dread, not from the thing itself, but from the knowledge that it understood him in ways no brother ever had. In the depths of the warp-born world he approached, a host of word-bearers knelt in ritual formation. Their dark apostle, masked in scripture carved from living flesh, addressed them with a fever that shook the stones beneath their feet. "He comes," the apostle whispered, "the first and last instrument of our rebirth." They believed Corax was the key, yes, but what they worshipped was not the Primarch. It was the presence entwined with him, the forgotten residue of a legion's suffering, a psychic scar that had grown teeth. They called it the Echo Rot, a being shaped from Corax's grief, sharpened by the warp, and perfected by their heresy. A dark twin born of betrayal's deepest wound. In the charred libraries of the Ordo Chronos, a lone archivist pored over ancient records. She unearthed a log dated to the closing days of the heresy, sealed under 10 inquisitorial ciphers. It spoke of experimentation gene echoes, psychic imprints, and the attempt to create a contingency should a Primarch fall. A fragment of identity extracted and stored. But the logs ended abruptly, the final entry static written except for a single phrase, "The shadow has a will of its own." The archivist felt the temperature drop. She knew she should burn the file and pray for forgiveness. Instead, she read it again, her breath turning to frost. On Ultramar's throne moon, Guilliman stood alone upon his stratagem balcony, his armor reflecting the dim glow of distant starfire. Reports of Corax multiplied. Reports of the second presence multiplied faster. Guilliman pressed a palm against his brow, feeling the weight of a brother's suffering and another brother's legacy twisting into something unrecognizable. He wondered whether fate itself had begun to fracture, splintering into impossible shapes. He whispered Corax's name to the silence, a plea, a warning, and a sorrow all at once. Inquisitor Viho finally confronted the one truth he had avoided. He summoned his psyker, a woman whose mind flickered like a dying flame. Through her, he sought clarity. But as she reached into the Imperium, she screamed. A shape appeared behind Corax, tall, winged, identical, yet eyeless, its presence dripping with the cold logic of a being rediscovering its own purpose. Before her eyes burst in her skull, she gasped a single word, reflection, then she died. Below, on the warped world of crimson fog, Corax emerged from shadow and confronted what awaited him. It stepped from the mist as form, but gaunt, starved, sculpted from sorrow and vengeance, stripped of humanity, a perfect echo of his darkest self. A twin born not of flesh, but of grief and warp, and the legacy of Istvan carved into metaphysical bone. And as the word-bearers fell to their knees in ecstasy, the echo opened its talons and spoke in Corax's own voice, "I am the part you buried, and I am done waiting." The words hung between them like a wound that could never heal. Corax stared into the face that was his own, yet not his grief-given form. His vengeance distilled into a creature of perfect cruelty. The air trembled, reality shivered. Even the crimson fog recoiled as if afraid. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. No wind, no warp taint. Only the mirrored beat of two hearts forged from the same tragedy. Across the galaxy, those bound to Corax by oath, by blood, or by memory, felt an indescribable tightening in their chests. Chaplains faltered mid-litany. Veterans paused mid-strike. Silent prayers dried in the throats of the faithful. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath, awaiting a verdict older than the heresy itself. On Helios' cradle, the Raven Guard survivors felt the psychic quake. Their sergeant sank to one knee, clutching the aquila carved into his chest plate. He whispered their Primarch's name as though speaking it might anchor the galaxy. But the name tasted different now, sharper, darker, heavy with a second presence. The chaplain guiding them sensed the shift and feared its meaning. He had taught his warriors that vengeance was a duty, not a companion. Now he feared that vengeance had become a voice. And that voice had answered back. He stared toward the heavens and wondered whether loyalty still meant following a Primarch or resisting what he might become. Inquisitor Vahal studied the psychic aftermath like a priest deciphering the heartbeat of a dying god. His ship's alarms screeched with data too contradictory to categorize, two identical signatures, one burning like a star collapsing, the other cold as the code of uncreation. His hololith flickered with silhouettes that merged and split, corrupted echoes of Corax's wings arching like blades across the projection. His retinue watched him, waiting for orders, but Vahal remained still. Every choice before him led to ruin, intervention, annihilation, or silence. He wondered when the Imperium had last faced a threat measured not in legions or abominations, but in the fractured soul of one of its own demigods. In the sanctums of the Sororitas, Canoness Vera knelt beneath the pulsing relic feather. Its glow had changed, no longer a steady rhythm of sorrow, but a frantic flicker, like a dying heartbeat trying to split itself in two. She placed her gaunted hand upon the stasis crystal, feeling warmth and cold in alternating waves. Whispers rose around her, her sisters praying, doubting, pleading. The canoness closed her eyes and confronted a truth she had long feared. Perhaps the Emperor's greatest servants were never meant to survive the weight of his expectations. Perhaps even angels fractured under too much grief. Perhaps devotion itself could doom the galaxy as surely as treachery. On the fortress world of Vorgon's Reach, the Raven Guard squad continued forward through the ruin-lit dusk, haunted by the sensation of being shadowed by themselves. One Marine swore he saw his own silhouette twitch in a direction his body did not. Another felt his shadow hesitate while he advanced. Yet they marched, because marching was all they had left, all that kept despair from hollowing them into husks. Loyalty, they decided, was not about certainty. It was about enduring the horror of not knowing and continuing regardless. But as they reached the broken gates of the Manufactorum, they felt a psychic pulse that shattered every illusion they had left. A scream two voices fused rolled across the stars. On Trismega Prime, Cardinal Octavia addressed her congregation once more. Her voice faltered as tremors rattled the cathedral. Statues cracked, candles split. The stained glass shattered inward, raining down shards that glowed faintly with psychic residue. The people cried out in terror, believing demons had come, but Octavia knew better. This was not the warp intruding. This was truth attempting to surface, truth suppressed for millennia, truth powerful enough to rend holy walls. She stood amid the wreckage, realizing that every lie she had preached in obedience to her superiors had finally gathered the courage to scream. Inside the ritual arena on the warp world, the word-bearers watched Corax and his echo with breathless anticipation. They believed themselves safe spectators to a divine convergence, but their arrogance was punished swiftly. The warp rippled as Corax moved not to strike his twin, but to shield himself from an unseen blow. The echo responded with a wicked grin, raising a taloned hand. In that instant, every traitor present felt their bones vibrate as though their skeletons were trying to flee their flesh. Several collapsed in ecstatic agony, their faith rewarded with revelation too vast for sanity. The apostle tried to speak, to proclaim destiny's fulfillment, but his voice dissolved into a gurgle of blood. In the Ordo Chronos archive, the lone archivist deciphered the final fragments of the lost experiment. She realized too late that the so-called Gene Echo was not meant as a replacement for a fallen Primarch, but as a reservoir for his pain. A vessel, a repository, a failsafe for the Imperium to draw upon if ever they needed a weapon forged from perfect directed grief. But the experiment had vanished during the heresy, presumed destroyed. Now she understood it had merely slept, and Corax in his boundless sorrow had awakened it. She dropped the data slate, trembling. The Imperium had created the monster now wearing his face. On Macragge, Guilliman gripped the railing of his stratagem balcony as another surge rippled through the warp. He felt twin signatures pulling against the fabric of destiny itself. Corax divided, Corax doubled. Corax forced into conflict with that which should not exist. Guilliman whispered his brother's name again, but this time it sounded less like a plea and more like a farewell. He turned away, knowing the Imperium stood at a precipice. Whether Corax triumphed or fell, the consequences would shape the galaxy. On the warp world, Corax's wings stretched to their full span, trembling with fury, sorrow, and a growing terror. The Echo stepped closer, each movement flawless, each gesture dripping with cruel familiarity. It leaned in, forehead nearly touching his, and whispered, "You thought vengeance was your burden. It was your seed." The galaxy pulsed with the weight of the words. Then the Echo changed. Its form deepened, darkened, reshaping itself with the smooth inevitability of prophecy fulfilled. Talons lengthened. Wings broadened. Its face dissolved into shifting shadow, forming something greater and infinitely worse than a reflection. When it spoke again, the voice was no longer Corax's. It was all the Raven Guard who died on Isfahan. A legion's agony given one monstrous voice. "We have returned." The voice of the fallen legion rolled across the warp world like a tidal scream, tearing the crimson fog into spirals of agony. Corax staggered beneath its weight, as though the accumulated grief of 10,000 murdered sons had been set upon his shoulders. The Echo no, the legion shade towered now, its wings blotting out the fractured sky. Each feather dripped memories, brothers dying on black sand, ravens silenced mid-cry, the Primarch himself kneeling among broken bodies that could not answer him. Corax felt the familiar wound reopen raw, bottomless, eternal. But beneath the grief stirred something fiercer, the refusal to let his sons die again. With a cry that broke the fog like glass, he lunged, wings folding into blades. The clash did not sound like steel. It sounded like a planet dying. Warp stones shattered under their blows, sigils rupturing into violent storms. The word-bearers fled, their faith collapsing into animal panic as the Primarch and his shade tore through creation itself. Corax fought like a storm unhinged from the sky talons flashing, shadows ripping through distorted space. But his strikes passed through the legion shade as though hitting smoke made of sorrows and spite. In turn, the entity struck with the weight of collective regret. Corax felt every blow not upon his flesh but in his mind. Visions of moments he had failed, brothers he had lost, sons he could not save. Blood spilled from eyes that had seen too much truth. On Helios' cradle, the connected Raven Guard dropped to their knees mid-battle. Their hearts stuttered. Their memories twisted. Some saw glimpses of their Primarch falling. Others saw him crowned in darkness. None could distinguish vision from prophecy. Their chaplain shouted to stand, to hold formation, but even he felt the warp tremor echo inside his skull like a morning bell. He clutched his Crozius, whispering a prayer he no longer fully believed. A soldier beside him wept openly behind his helm, whispering, "Father, don't die again." The battlefield felt eerily quiet, as if awaiting a verdict. Inquisitor Vihal watched his instruments crack under the strain of impossible data. 2 signatures, 2 destinies, 2 fates entwined in combat, so intense the warp itself bent into spirals of distortion. His psyker cadre bled from their eyes, collapsing one after another as the psychic shockwaves spread. Vihal grabbed the hololith's edge, knuckles white, as the silhouette of Corax faltered, his form flickering like a candle beset by a hurricane. The Echo surged, its wings widening into an eclipse of hatred, the collective will of the martyred Raven Guard given monstrous volition. Vihal whispered, "Corax, choose before the warp chooses for you." In the ritual arena, the word-bearers were shredded by stray psychic currents, bodies rupturing, armor screaming as if alive. The Dark Apostle crawled forward, desperate to witness the conclusion. He believed the prophecy clear. The Echo would devour Corax, and the reborn entity would be theirs to shape, a Primarch of pure despair. But as he reached out, his hand dissolved into black ash. What he saw next unmade him. Corax rising through the storm, not in fury, but in mournful resolve. His wings wrapped around him like a shroud, and his eyes once cold with vengeance, now glowed with something far older, acceptance. On Trismega Prime, Cardinal Octavia felt that acceptance ripple across the galaxy. She fell to one knee, tears marking her face. Around her, the congregation trembled, sensing a shift they could not name. She whispered, "He forgives them." And though she did not know who them was, traitors, sons, or himself, the truth felt right. A warmth spread through her chest, brief and fragile, before fading into melancholy. Faith had not been restored, only understood. For the first time, she saw the Emperor not as an answer, but as a question no one alive could finish. Corax's acceptance was not surrender, it was choice. He stepped into the Legion Shade's next blow, letting talons pierce his chest, not resisting. Instead, he pulled the entity close, wings cocooning them both. The Shade shrieked in 1,000 voices, sensing the trap too late. Corax whispered, "If you are my grief, then return to me. If you are my sons, then let me carry you." The Shade convulsed, its form fracturing like a mirror thrown from a great height. Memories surged, countless deaths, cries, last breaths, rushing into Corax's mind with the force of a collapsing star. The shockwave obliterated the ritual arena. Warp mountains fell, sigils died. The crimson fog evaporated in a single soundless blink. When the storm cleared, only one figure remained. Corax knelt in the crater, wings tattered, body bowed as though mourning. The Shade was gone, absorbed, redeemed, or imprisoned within his soul. No one could tell. His eyes opened. They were no longer the eyes of a Primarch alone. They held the weight of an entire legion's sorrow, bound and burning. Across the Imperium, millions felt the moment. Ravenguard Marines gasped as if taking a breath they had forgotten. Chaplains clutched relics as tears streaked down hardened faces. Even Guilliman paused mid-command, sensing the return of something both terrible and profound. The galaxy shivered, reshaped around this single act of reclamation. Corax rose slowly, feathers drifting from his wings like dying stars. His voice, when it came, was impossibly quiet, yet heard by every soul connected to him across the void. "I carry them now." Silence followed, deep, endless, reverent. Then the sky above him, once crimson, split open. A new shadow descended. Not an echo, not a memory, something older. Something watching. Something that had waited for the moment Corax became whole again. And as its vast silhouette darkened the world, Corax whispered the final words of the old prophecy, words he had never spoken aloud. "The true hunt begins." The shadow that descended upon Corax did not strike, did not roar, did not proclaim its dominion. It simply hovered above the shattered world like a question carved from the bones of extinct gods. The air trembled around its presence, a hum older than written memory, older than the first oath sworn beneath the Imperium's dawn. Corax looked up, his wings trailing tired feathers across the broken stone, and in the depths of that vast silhouette he saw not malice, but a reflection of what the galaxy had become, a labyrinth of grief searching for meaning. The entity receded, not out of defeat, but out of acknowledgement, leaving the Primarch alone amid the crater of his choosing. Corax sank to one knee, not in supplication, but in acceptance. The sky healed above him, though it remained forever dimmed, as if mourning the battle it had just survived. In the days that followed, no armies marched, no legions thundered across the plains of Helios Cradle. War had been momentarily stunned into silence, as though the universe itself inhaled and held its breath. Ravenguard across the stars felt a quiet thrum in their chests where once a hollow ache had lived. They whispered litanies no chaplain had taught them, prayers shaped like memories. Some knelt in shattered chapels, others in the ashes of old campaigns, and a few simply stood beneath unfamiliar suns, letting the cold light settle upon their armor. None claimed victory, none called it redemption. They only knew their father still lived, still carried them, still bore the echo of their sorrow in his own marrow. And in that simple truth, something fragile, something almost like hope, breathed for the first time in centuries. On Terra, scribes struggled to record the psychic tremor that rippled across the Astronomican's periphery. They could not categorize it. It was neither warning nor prophecy. Instead, it felt like the sigh of an unspoken truth brushing against the fabric of reality. High Lords paused mid-edict, unable to name the unease coiling in their chests. Even the custodian standing vigil felt a shift, subtle, reverent, unsettling. Out beyond the palace walls, pilgrims gathered around ruined shrines, tracing their fingers across devotional plates tarnished by time. A blind priest raised his face to the sky and asked softly if this change was mercy or merely another shade of war. No answer came. None ever would. But the question lingered, suspended above Terra like a feather refusing to fall. The word-bearers left Helios' cradle in fractured disarray, their faith cracked open like a shell too tightly clenched. Some tore off their scripture plates, screaming at the silence of the gods who had promised them dominion. Others whispered of what they had seen, Corax rising from the storm like a living lament, wings ragged but unbowed, carrying the sorrow of a legion without letting it drown him. For zealots who worshipped despair as a weapon, witnessing someone master it instead of succumbing broke something vital inside them. The dark apostle, half disintegrated, crawled into the warp wind and vanished, chanting incoherent verses to deities suddenly too small to answer. Their exodus left the battlefield steeped in a stillness that felt almost sacred. The remembrancers who arrived days later walked through the ruins in reverent silence. They found broken helms arranged like abandoned votives, feathers drifting in slow spirals through the red haze. One remembrancer, a woman with a cracked lens and ink-stained fingers, knelt at the crater's edge and touched the scorched earth. She felt warmth still clinging to the stone, as though the moment of transformation had not yet cooled. She wrote of a Primarch made not by gene forging alone, but by the burden of shared grief. She wrote that sorrow, when carried with purpose, could become a guiding star. Her parchment trembled as she wrote the final line, "Some wounds heal by remembering, not forgetting." The page ended there, heavy with unsaid truths, and she pressed her hand to her chest as if steadying a heartbeat not entirely her own. On Trismega Prime, Cardinal Octavius stood before a shattered cathedral, its stained glass melted into molten rivers of color. The sermon she had prepared felt hollow now. Instead, she spoke softly to the congregation gathered among ruins. She told them that faith was not a weapon to be brandished, nor a shield to hide behind. It was a road walked in darkness, where the only light came from choosing to continue. She confessed that she did not know whether the Emperor had shaped the moment that trembled across the galaxy, or if it belonged solely to Corax and the sons he reclaimed. Her voice cracked as she asked whether survival meant endurance, or merely the postponement of ruin. The congregation remained silent, not out of fear, but in shared contemplation. Sometimes silence was the nearest thing to truth. Corax wandered the wasteland alone for 3 days. His wings dragged behind him, leaving thin trails across the dust like lines of ink across a dying manuscript. The echo of his legion whispered within him, not in torment, but as distant memories seeking rest. Each step felt like a promise kept too late to matter, yet he walked on, not toward a destiny, but toward understanding. At dusk of the 3rd day, he stood atop a broken monolith and gazed at the horizon where smoke met starlight. He wondered if the galaxy had room for redemption, or if all beings were merely actors repeating ancient tragedies written long before their births. He lifted his face to the wind and whispered one question: is endurance a gift or a punishment? Far across the void, Raven Guard sergeants gathered their squads in quiet halls, illuminated only by flickering votive candles. They spoke of duty not as an oath to the Imperium, but as a tether between themselves and the memory of the brothers who had not survived to see this strange peace. Veterans recounted old battles in hushed voices, not glorifying but mourning. A scout asked if Corax would return to lead them. The sergeant placed a hand on the young warrior's pauldron and said that some leaders guide best by absence, allowing their sons to grow without leaning on the shadow of their father. The candles flickered as though stirred by unseen wings, and every marine felt the faintest pulse of warmth against their breastplate, like a heartbeat synchronized across the stars. On the forgotten moon of Threnos, a lone Vox interrogator replayed the psychic tremor on a malfunctioning Auspex. The device stuttered, crackling with ghost sounds wind through feathers, distant lamentations, the quiet thump of a wounded heart. He leaned close, listening as though hearing the dying whispers of saints. He wondered why such sorrow had felt almost beautiful. When the signal ended abruptly, he stared at the silent machine, hands trembling. He whispered to no one, "If grief binds us, does joy set us free?" The question drifted through the empty station like a wandering spirit. No answer came, only the soft hum of cosmic static that sounded, for a moment, like wings departing. In the deep vaults beneath the Scholastica Sicana, the choir matriarch recorded a final entry in a sealed tome. She wrote of a psychic resonance that bore neither the Emperor's light nor the warp's corruption, but something close to human truth rendered vast. She wrote that Corax's action had changed the tapestry of fate, not by severing threads, but by weaving new ones from old wounds. She ended with a warning that the quiet after great suffering was always temporary. Storms rebuilt themselves in the breathless calm. She sealed the tome with a trembling hand, sensing that future generations would open it only in times of desperate need. Her final thought, left uninked, lingered in the dim air. Even gods tremble when mortals reclaim their sorrow. Back on the shattered world, the crater where Corax once knelt had cooled. Dust settled in soft layers, covering footprints, bloodstains, and broken sigils. The wind carried faint whispers, as if reciting forgotten oaths. A single raven, feather intact, unburned, lay at the center. The remembrancer who found it lifted it gently, unsure whether it was relic, omen, or farewell. She tucked it into her journal and closed the cover with reverence. In that moment she understood that some endings did not conclude. They dispersed, like prayers cast into the void. She murmured a final benediction to a galaxy that could no longer hear her. The chronicles would say that Corax departed the world quietly, wings trailing behind him like the last strokes of an unfinished painting. They would say he vanished into the void without ceremony, leaving only a tremor in the hearts of those who felt his burden. But those who truly understood knew he had not departed. They knew he walked still, not as a hero, not as a monster, but as a keeper of grief made sacred. And so the final question lingered across the Imperium like a fading hymn. When sorrow becomes strength, does it save the soul, or merely prepare it for the next wound? If you stood witness to this tale, if you felt its echo, its silence, its wings, then like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments so the chronicle may continue.